am running for County Court Judge, Group 19. I have spent my life devoted to the law, to women, and to children. I've been practicing for over 27 years. I have tried more than 200 jury trials, specializing in crimes against women, where women are victims of crimes, and trying to empower them to do better with their life. But more importantly, I've also spent my life as a foster parent, taking in children who have nowhere else to go and who need me the most. I have made a difference. My name is Allison Gilman. Please remember Group 19. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to our next candidate, Ms. Jacqueline Jo Marie Jackie Powell. You want Mr. John Phillips next? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Phillips. He's second on the ballot. We'll keep it that way. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening. My name is Jack Phillips. I came down from Newark, New Jersey, from Seton Hall Law, thinking I'd be here for a year. Met a nice gal, and I'm still here. I raised 2 kids by myself. My more than 30 years of practice, I've represented people from all walks of life. I've handled almost every case that ever come before my county court, interesting many judges and lawyers. I'd like to be your county court judge. I have extensive experience, and I've volunteered on the Code Enforcement Board, the Unsafe Structure Board for more than 13 years, with thousands of evidentiary hearings.
Thank you, sir.
My time is up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can pass it to Jackie. Thank you. Then rounding out this group is Ms. Jacqueline Jo Marie Jackie Powell.
Good evening. I'm Jackie Powell, and I'm your next candidate for County Court in Group 19. The Sun Sentinel in their endorsement said that Jackie Powell is the best of the 3 candidates, and I agree with them. I have over 20 years of practice. I started out as a paralegal, worked my way up, went to law school. Today I manage my own firm. I've done criminal work, I've done civil work, trial work. I've done over 200 trials. Jackie Powell, County Court, Powell for the people.
Thank you. Now to Group 25, we'll start with the incumbent, Robert W. Lee.
Thank you very much. I'm Robert W. Lee, County Court Judge. I have actually been on the bench 21 years, but I was originally an elementary school teacher who went to law school, practiced law here in Broward County, and was appointed to the bench 21 years ago. I'd like to keep my position. I've been endorsed by not only the Teachers Union, the Sun Sentinel, AFL-CIO, and almost any other group that gives endorsements. So I hope you'll support me August 28th. Thank you very much, folks.
And I don't see your opponent. Stephen Lustig? No, maybe? No? Oh, not you? Okay, that's fine. We'll go to the questions. Come forward, please. Ms. Gilman. She's like Miss America. Okay. Do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this? I'll repeat it. Do you believe that the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this?
I love this question. Being a trial lawyer, I cannot even tell you how many times I have sat next to someone and we watch the jury stroll in and there is not one person that looks or sounds or acts or has lived the life of my client. And we are praying to God that somehow I can show these people what this person's life has been like. Yes, we do need to change this. And the question that you gave about the driver's license, a lot of people don't have driver's licenses, but they should still be a jury. They still should be jurors. They still are out there, they're living life. My clients, a lot of them don't have licenses. So we should try and pull from the pool of voters that we have, registrations, not driver's license. It is important to be judged, a juror of your peers, someone that can relate to your life.
Thank you. Thank you. Going to Mrs. Phillips and Ms. Powell, where are you going to go? Are you going to go in first? Whichever. Tell me. All right, Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Says, do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct? I think there's a rule, actually. Do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct, and why?
Yes. Does anyone here think that a judge shouldn't do that?
Exactly.
I wrote a book, How and When to Sue Your Lawyer, a layperson's guide on legal malpractice. I've had 9,000 copies sold. And I can tell you, Broward County has been embarrassed with the judiciary. None here, none of my colleagues, any candidates. Integrity and hard work. Judges need to do the right thing. What message they give filters down to the lawyers, and there's some tough judges that I've appeared at before over 36 years who ruled for me and against me, but I always felt that I had trust in them, and I never went close to the gray line. Of course, judges need and must report. We can't have this good old boy or good old girl system where, well, that was a mistake and I don't want to. You do the right thing. You don't go near the gray lines. Black and white, good and bad.
Time.
And I intend to adhere to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Finishing up your group, Ms. Jackie Powell. All right. What criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of standard ranges? What criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of standard ranges?
I believe that question is asking me to state a policy that I would use in sentencing, and we're not allowed to do that. But certainly within the guidelines of the sentencing guidelines, and we're running for county court, so we wouldn't even be dealing with the sentencing guidelines, but based on what the sentencing is required in that, whatever the charge is, that's what we would have to work with. And then also, you definitely need to evaluate each case as it comes before you. Can't just be a blanket, this is what we're gonna do, right? So depending on what the charge is, depending on what the law allows me to do, that's the criteria that I would have to use. We have the advantage as judges to use our discretion in some areas, and definitely we should do that. And so it's important that everyone who comes before a judge is treated fairly and impartially. So whatever sentence you make, it should not be a sentence based on whatever the time or the race or whatever.
Okay, thank you. All right, and finishing up the next group by yourself, incumbent Judge Robert W. Lee. You got a big question. Recently, we saw 2 more persons of color killed by police officers, and for the most part, these officers oftentimes are found not guilty, and the judicial system is blamed. From your perspective, where do you see the breakdown? Is it law enforcement officers, state attorneys, the juries, or the judges, and why?
Well, thank you for that extremely tough question to answer. That's a philosophical question because, of course, in county court, we're not going to be dealing with that issue.
We'll save it for circuit, but please address it.
I will address it, but I just want everyone to be aware of that. The particular issue that we're talking about in Broward County specifically, because that's what I can talk about, is we have a system set up so that hopefully we have enough checks and balances that there will not be a miscarriage of justice. These cases go to the grand jury. If there is an indictment, it's going to go to a second jury, what we call a petty jury. So hopefully, through that process, justice will be served. I cannot say that's the case in every circuit in Florida, but it's clearly the case in this county.
Thank you, Judge Lee. And we'd like to thank this staff of candidates. We will start with Group 19. You may stand together. Group 19, Allison Gilman, Jackie Powell, and John Phillips. Thank you for joining us. You may exit the stage. And holding it down by his lonesome is incumbent Judge Robert W. Lee, Group 25. Thank you. Now we're moving to big money cases. The circuit courts primarily handle civil cases where the amount in controversy is greater than $15,000. They also handle felony criminal cases as well as appeals from county court. We're going to start with 3 groups. Group 8, we welcome you to the stage. Two candidates, Ernest Colra apologizes. He was actually at a conference. He said he'd love to be here. Ernest Colra against Mr. Alan Schneider. Welcome to the stage, sir. Group 8. Group 36, we have Shari Beth Afrik Olofsson. Welcome, ma'am. Running against Kristen Weisenberg Padowitz. Welcome to the stage. Please sit together. And we also will welcome at this time Circuit Court Judge Group 38. Welcoming to the stage now Jason Allen Rosner, Melissa Minx Donahoe, Linda Marie Leali, and Stephanie Camille Moon. We welcome 3 groups to the stage at this time. We will start with, once you're seated, the introductions, 30 seconds each. All right, here's, tell me your name again. For Donahoe? Okay, we'll allow you to, I don't think you can answer the policy question, but you can do the introduction. All right, Mr. Schneider, you're up.
Hello, everybody. Alan Schneider, your candidate for Group 8. 30 seconds. 50 years, Broward County, Nova High School, K-12. My good buddy who I met last week, fellow Florida Gator, graduated with honors. Practicing attorney, 30 years of experience down here in South Florida. My promise to you is that I have what you need up here and what you need in here to be a good judge. Alan Schneider, please remember me on election day.
Thank you. Group 36, Miss Shari Beth Afrik Olofsson.
Thank you so much. No one calls me that except my mom. Shari Afrik Olofsson. The Sun Sentinel actually said that Broward needs more judges like me, and the reason is that I've actually already been doing a job very much like a judge for almost 30 years. I've been getting their referrals for very difficult cases in the courtroom, handling them as a mediator, over 20,000 cases. 98% of cases are settled that way in our courthouse. That's experience that matters. Only about 2% of cases even ever go to trial. Very involved in the community, lots of civil and criminal law experience and psychological experience.
Thank you. You pass the mic to your left. Next we have your opponent, Ms. Kristen Weisberg Padowitz.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I am Kristen Weisberg Padowitz. I am running for Circuit Court Judge in Group 36. I started my career as a public defender. I defended juveniles. I then became an assistant state attorney because I desired to be a well-rounded lawyer. I now work in a criminal defense and civil litigation law firm. I have tried 75 jury trials, and jury trial experience matters. We're dealing with the 2% that matter.
Time.
Kristen Weisberg Padowitz, thank you.
All right, our next group, Group 38, has 4 people running against each other, starting with Mr. Jason Allen Rosner.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Allen Rosner. I'm running for Circuit Court Judge for Group 38. I've lived in South Florida since 1985. For the past 14 years, I've been a trial attorney. And what's more important, and what my opponents can't say, and only the people in the room that can say it are the sitting judges, is that I have an extensive amount of experience presiding over cases. If you got a traffic ticket in this county over the past 6 years, you took it to court, there was a decent chance that I was the one who decided it. So if it was dismissed, remember, Jason Allen Rosner was given off the ticket.
Hey, no bribing.
Not bribing, those decisions are already made. Jason Allen Rosner.
Thank you, time.
Thank you.
All right, speaking on behalf of Melissa Donahoe. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yes, and then Ms. Leali, you can go after that. Or if you'd like to go now. All right, Linda Marie Leali, go ahead. He's being, okay, there you go.
Thank you. Linda Leali. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a South Florida resident, South Florida native, 19-year resident of Broward County. I'm one of 6 children, number 4. I have a daughter, she's 12 years old, and she's an amazing violinist. Now, the thing that sets me apart is that for the last nearly 20 years, I've been practicing exclusively business law. And that's important because 80% of our cases are civil cases, and only 20% are criminal cases. So I think I would add some depth and diversity to that.
Thank you. And I got this before. Sorry, Mr. Gentry Chambers, speaking on behalf of Melissa Donahoe for the introduction.
My name is Gentry Chambers. I'm the chief investigator of the Office of Regional Counsel. I watched a woman 7 years ago take an office that was understaffed, that wasn't respected by the courts, and turn them around. She has done, I mean, huge things for our community. I'm here because I believe in Melissa. I wouldn't be here otherwise. I'd be having something else to do. Please, if you want change, if you want somebody that's going to represent our community, vote for Melissa.
Thank you. And rounding out this group is Miss Stephanie Camille Moon.
Good evening, everyone. Stephanie Camille Moon, Circuit Court Judge, Group 38. I'm the only candidate in my race who's been both a plaintiff's and a defense attorney, handled both civil and criminal matters in both state and federal court. I've also been a special master, so I have already fundamentally done this job. Remember, Stephanie Camille Moon, Circuit Court Judge, Group 38, once in a blue moon.
Thank you. So everyone except Mr. Gentry will choose a question. All right, Mr. Schneider, you're up first.
If I don't like the question, I'm going to pick one of the ones that was better. Like you let Sokolov, so all right, let's pick a good drama. Oh, the drama.
Okay. All right, this is a repeat. You got a good one. Do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this?
I think the big problem with the jury system is, and when you say juries, there's different types of juries. You've got the grand jury, which there's been a lot of hoo-ha if anybody's followed. 6 months. How many people can take 6 months of their life to go sit on a grand jury? It's just not practical unless you're retired or disabled. So those are some real issues. And I think I answered the question, but there's some other important questions that you were asking before. Fairness is the key. Everybody that goes to court needs to be treated fairly and consistently. That's the problem that I've researched, and I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I've researched the criminal division. Bias on the bench. Look it up, check out our judges. Thank you.
Thank you. You can pass them. All right, to our next contestant, Ms. Sherry Olafson.
Good. Congratulations on your award.
What injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom? And what was your response to those events? What injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom? And what was your response to those events?
That's a great question. Raise your hand if you think that our justice system is fair. It's very telling. So one of the things I did, I've been planning on running for judge for 10 years. Once I decided this was going to be the cycle, one of the things I did is I went back into the courtroom, this time not as an attorney, not as a mediator, but as an observer. And it is striking to anyone who just goes in there and, unlike a lawyer, just keeps their mouth shut and just watches the racial bias, the socioeconomic bias. I think that the injustices are rampant. I actually went back to school 2 years ago to get my master's degree in psychology because I think that the implicit bias that's baked into our system needs to be addressed. The mental health and substance abuse that are plaguing our criminal justice system needs to be addressed. And I feel that I needed more of a scientific background to be able to be a judge and understand that and go into the courtroom and make some change. And that's one of the things I'm going to be doing.
Thank you. In her race is Kristen Weisberg, Paddle. Awesome, new one. If you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? If you became aware of unethical conduct on behalf of a trial attorney in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it?
As a trial lawyer who's tried 75 jury trials and being the only candidate in Group 36 with trial experience, that is well within my experience that I have seen being in the courtroom every day. There are rules in place for us as attorneys and as judges to report unethical behavior. I think there's levels of behavior that can kind of be on the line and then go over the line. So depending on what the situation is, I could either deal with it myself as the judge and have a conference along with the attorneys and discuss what's happening. And if it went across that line, then I would take the appropriate measures and do the appropriate procedure that is in place to take care of that situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Padowitz. You can pass the mic. Going to group 38 now. The question is, have you ever been disciplined by the Bar Association or the State Commission on Judicial Conduct?
No. I don't plan on being. I haven't been. How much time do I have left to say
You can go ahead, yes. Go ahead. You can actually, if there's any issue or anything else you'd like to just address, you can
Let's address it. Let's take a second. Roger DeHart. He's here. He's a friend of mine. All of you know Roger DeHart? Roger, stand up. I got a minute. I'll use it on you. It's Roger DeHart. For those of you that don't know what he did, he walked from the Fort Lauderdale Courthouse to Washington, D.C. to address human trafficking issues. That's the kind of person that I like to call a friend. Thank you, Roger, for being here. For those of you, and just conveniently, when he did walk in, all the ladies stood up, so Roger, good move on that part, too. But for those issues, a lot of the issues that we're hearing is about the quality of the court system and fairness. As a sitting hearing officer, I had people from the community come to me, not just represented by lawyers, but people themselves come in. And that's where I got to see how traffic court affects people. People say, traffic court, not a big deal, how does that make a circuit court judge? Those people don't sit across the people that say, that's my electric bill, that's my diapers, that's my medicine. Those are the kind of issues that someone has to understand, and I've got 6 years of experience in presiding on those issues. Thank you very much, Jason Alumnae.
Thank you. You can pass the mic. Go ahead. Ms. Leali. All right. What are your views on the need for more diversity on the bench and the manner in which the court treats members of different races? What are your views on the need for more diversity on the bench and the manner in which the court treats members of different races?
First of all, I am very involved in the resource board for the National Association of Women Judges. And so for the last, probably about 5 years or so, I've had the opportunity, I was talking to some folks about this before, to sit through a lot of the educational training that the judges have. And I am aware that not everybody gets the same treatment. That when we talk about, folks of color, African Americans, Hispanics, they are not all treated the same, that they have higher sentencing. I think it's important in that regard that judges are aware of the implicit bias that exists. And we talked about what would I do? What I would do is just be very aware of that. I, right now, for the last 3 years, have been working in the Overtown and Liberty City neighborhoods of Miami. On a weekly basis, I'm there working in the apartments, working with the folks that live there. So do I think there needs to be diversity on the bench?
Time.
Yes.
Thank you. And you can pass the mic to Ms. Stephanie Camille Moon. We have one more original question left, and the next questions will be used for the circuits. This question reads, if a person chooses to be pro se, does everyone know what that means? That means a person that goes to court without a lawyer, they represent themselves. If a person chooses to be pro se in your court, and you recognize that they are being outmaneuvered by a more skillful attorney, how would you handle such an instance? If a person chooses to be pro se in your court, and you recognize that they are being outmaneuvered by a more skillful attorney, how would you handle such an instance?
I have handled matters for the Valuable Adjustment Board where people were pro se and going up against attorneys who use the law against them. When a person appears pro se, they take a risk in being outmaneuvered by the lawyer who knows all the rules. Within the capacity of being a judge, you have the ability to guide a person, but only to a certain extent. You cannot offer advice. You cannot suggest to them how they might proceed. So if I were faced with that situation once again, I would do exactly what I had done before. I would exercise patience. I would treat that person with respect and dignity and give them every opportunity to be fully heard so that I could fairly consider their matter, regardless of their level of articulation of expression.
Thank you. You can put your mic on the chair. All right, so we'll dismiss by group. Let us hear it for Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider and Ms. Patrick Olafson. You're all by yourself. That's why I'm like, okay. Mr. Schneider was the gentleman who couldn't come. Ms. Colra and Ms. Colra. Goodbye. No, I'm saying in your race was Mr. Colra who could not appear. So only he is in group 30, excuse me, group 8. Thank you, got me straight. All right, so group 36, saying goodbye to us now, is Ms. Sherry Beth Afric Olafson, thank you. And her opponent, Ms. Kristen Weisberg-Katowitz, thank you. Saying goodbye from group 38, a full roster of 4 candidates, Jason Allen Rossner, thank you. Melissa, on behalf of Melissa Donahoe, Mr. Gentry, Linda Marie Leali, and Stephanie Camille Moon, thank you. All right, heading into the circuit bench, group 42. Or let's actually start right there. Thank you, guys. All right, group 39. Susan Lynn Allspector. Thank you. As well as Camille Coolidge Shotwell. There are 2 in group 39. We're going to call everybody, all the rest of you together. Group. I think they're okay. Okay. All right, so that was group 39. Susan Lynn Allspector, Camille Coolidge Shotwell, group 42. Richard Brian Kaplan, along with seated Judge Michael Usan. Judge Usan. Group 43, this is our last group of judges, guys. Karen Elizabeth Berger and Dan Casey, as well as group 46, H. James Curry, Melissa Marqueson Weeks. Did I say that? Maria, what's that, Marissa? Maria. Say your name. Marqueson Weeks. All right, and rounding out group 46 is Walter Dale Miller. All right, this is like a full stage, okay? So rounding out our last group of circuit judges, thank you again for your patience as we move next to our federal office after this. So we're gonna do our introductions. Let's start with Ms. Spector. Allspector, thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Allspector. I'm running in Group 39 Circuit Court. I've been a marital and family trial attorney for almost 27 years, a resident of this county for 48. I've been a pro bono attorney representing veterans free of charge in our court system for the last 4 years, and I'm heavily involved with the Boys and Girls Club. It's a worthy organization. I promise you that I will always work hard for you, and I will always treat you with compassion and dignity and respect and as an equal, because it's my obligation as a judge to do so.
Thank you, Ms.
Allspector.
Thank you, Ms. Allspector. And in her race is Camille Coolidge Shotwell. 30 seconds.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Camille Coolidge Shotwell. I also practice family law and real estate and corporate litigation. And I'm a native of Florida. I also, you'll have a lot of information on my handout. 30 seconds doesn't have a lot of time, but I have been endorsed by the Sun Sentinel, along with all the first responders, unions, AFL-CIO, and the Hispanic vote. Camille Coolidge Shotwell.
Thank you. Moving on to group 42, Mr. Kaplan.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Richard Brian Kaplan. I'm running for Circuit Court Judge Group 42. And I need your vote and your support if I'm going to win this election on August the 28th. I am currently the Civil Litigation Director of the Regional Counsel's Office, which is another public defender office. I've been an Assistant Attorney General, Senior Attorney for the Department of Children and Families, and also the Assistant City Manager of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. My goal is to put my government and legal careers together and serve the Broward people. Remember, Kaplan, Group 42.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. All right, and Sitting Judge Michael Usan in that same race, Group 42.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Circuit Court Judge Michael Usan. It's not the easiest name to pronounce, but it's easy enough to remember. It's USA with an N on the end. It's been my honor and privilege to serve you as a Circuit Court Judge for the preceding just short of 9 years. I don't have to tell you what kind of judge I think I'll be or want to be, because I do have a 9-year track record of efficiency, fairness, and knowledge. That's why I've been endorsed by the Sun Sentinel, Hispanic Vote, and a whole bunch of others.
Thank you, Judge. All right, we're moving on to group 43. We're going to have first Karen Elizabeth Berger.
Great, thank you. Karen Elizabeth Berger for Group 43, Circuit Court Judge. Thank you for coming. I have to say this is a local gig for me. I live right down 3rd Street, which is fantastic. I'm running for judge because I can tell you as a female litigator who handles hearings and trials throughout the state of Florida, our legal community, and more so, the judiciary, is not a clear and equal representation of our community. And if elected, I hope to balance a little portion of that inequity. I'll just tell you this. If I had a quarter for every time someone thought I was a court reporter and not an attorney, I'd have a whole lot more money for my campaign. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And in her race, Dan Casey.
Hi everybody, my name is Dan. Hi everybody, my name is Dan Casey. I'm a candidate for Circuit Court Group 43. After graduating from Georgetown Law School, I was hired by Janet Reno to work at the Dade County State Attorney's Office starting in 1981. You can imagine I got a ton of trial experience. For the last 30 years, I've been a civil lawyer trying cases literally across the country of all different types. I also ran my law firm and sat on my management committee as we grew our firm into a global 20 law firm. I've been deeply involved in the community. Christy and I have lived in Hollywood for the last 33 years, where I've done everything, including service as the national chair of the YMCA. Thank you.
Moving on to group 46, we're going to start with none other than H. James Curry.
Hello, good evening, Pompano. How are you? I want to thank you for having us and thank you for coming here. My name is H. James Curry. I'm a senior attorney with the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. I've been a practicing attorney for 22 years. I live not too far from here in Pembroke Pines. Now, many of you may not know, but also the juvenile court is also in circuit court. Yes. And there are no jury trials in juvenile court. It's important that we have people with the right experience in our courts. That's the #1 issue that's been pointed to. Thank you very much, H. James Curry. Vote for Curry, you'll have no worries. Thank you.
Thank you. In that same race, we have Maria Marcusson Weeks.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Maria Marcusson Weeks, and I'm also a candidate in Group 46. I have spent my career as a trial attorney, as a civil trial attorney, and then as a criminal trial attorney. And I have also been very involved in our community. I volunteer with the Pay School for Girls, which is a program for at-risk juvenile girls. I do food service at Broward Partnership for the Homeless, and I provide pro bono work through legal aid for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford an attorney. So please remember Maria Marcusson Weeks, Group 46. Thank you.
Thank you. And rounding out this group is Walter Dale Miller.
Good evening, Dale Miller, running for Circuit Court in Group 46, native of South Florida. I grew up in Miami. I've been living in Broward County for the past 21 years. I'm married. I have 2 children who attend public schools here. I've served 12 years in the United States Navy. I have been a public defender for the past 12 years. If you want to know what kind of person I am, if you want to know what kind of character I have, if you want to know what kind of judge I will be, call my boss. His name is Howard Finkelstein. He'll be happy to tell you. Dale Miller, Circuit Court, Group 46, put a veteran on the bench.
All right, man, hold that mic. All right, we're going to the questions. Come step forward, please. First, we have Ms. Susan Lynn Alspector, Group 39. These now will be familiar to you. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any? What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
Bias in the court system. Implicit bias, explicit bias, prejudice, racism. People come to the court with ideas about how they've lived their lives and their own inherent prejudices, and those are things that transfer on through the court system. We have a disproportionate number of people of color, black and brown, who are arrested and who go through the judicial system. And the problem is that we don't have, or have not been able thus far to deal with that problem and the fact that these folks are entitled to equal justice.
Thank you. You can pass the mic to your opponent, Ms. Camille Coolidge-Shotwell. Question reads, but there being a number, oh no, you're not going against an incumbent, right? All right. What are the pros and cons of using driver's licenses registration as a source of jurors?
Well, not everybody has a driver's license. Not everybody drives. So I don't think that that is it is a resource, but I don't think it should be the only one. I think that there are methods available for when you graduate from high school, when people apply for diplomas, for GEDs, anything of that nature, or trades, any kind of licenses. I think it needs to be more than just a driver's license, because that isn't an equal representation of our community, because not everybody drives. And so that's the con. If the pro is that it's available, but there are other resources to track licenses, particularly with high school. You got to register to vote. You should be able to get into the jury pool.
Thank you. Next up, Group 42. You can give her a hand. Group 42, Richard Brian Kaplan. Let's do it. All right. With there being a number of open judicial vacancies in this year's election cycle, what was your motivation to challenge this incumbent judge?
Change. You heard Michael Heiss talk about it earlier. Time for change is now. For far too long, we've had a system. The judiciary is the most important branch of government. We've heard about checks and balances, but have we seen the checks and balances? We've seen the blind lady of justice. There's a reason why she holds scales that are even before somebody walks into the courtroom. Nobody wants to walk into a courtroom and feel like somebody's got their finger on the scale. Nobody wants to have the veil taken off. Somebody shouldn't be given special preference based on who their attorney is, how much money they have, or what group they come from. There's a reason why the blind lady of justice holds a knife and a sword, and she's stepping on the snake of injustice on top of the Bible about to cut the head off. This is why we need this change. We need a fair and impartial jury. We need a jurist that is not beholden to anybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan.
Remember, vote Kaplan, Group 42.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. I'll take the judge to your left, Judge Michael Uson. All right, do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct, and why?
Well, we are required to report when there's
attorney
misconduct as part of canons, and that's something that we're required to do. But really, in 9 years on the bench, I don't see a lot of attorney misconduct. Sometimes you see a little bit of attorneys trying to, skirt the edges, not really in misconduct, but in their demeanor. And I think the judge plays an important role in setting the tone in the courtroom, letting them know that we are not going to allow disparaging comments towards groups. We are not going to find racial or ethnic slurs are never going to be allowed or used. And just in the way we treat other people, we set a tone for how everyone in the courtroom should be treated and how they should behave. If they don't, well, they're going to be called up to the sidebar and they're going to have a discussion with me. I usually tell them if the behavior doesn't end, that we'll have a different kind of hearing. They won't like it.
Thank you. You may be seated. Let's go to your next group, 43, Karen Elizabeth Berger. Yes, I love the pageant view. Ready? All right. Have you ever been disciplined by a bar association and/or state commission or on judicial conduct? And since that's a yes or no, I'm also going to add what distinguishes you from your opponent.
Great, thank you. That's a no. I think that every candidate here are obviously well qualified and well educated, and I don't think anybody that I know of has been really had any kind of misconduct. So I don't think we would be running for judge if we had been. But what does distinguish me from my opponent, other than the obvious, is the fact that, again, I think that I have experienced firsthand bias as a woman in the legal system. Again, I kind of briefly mentioned in my opening, really, again, if I had a quarter for every time someone assumed I was a court reporter and not an attorney simply because I was a woman, I would have a lot more money to donate to my own campaign. But really what's important about that is that I understand that bias in the legal system can extend to so many people and for so many different reasons. And I think it's important that a judge not only recognize and understand that implicit bias, but actually have an understanding of it. So please, come August 28th, remember Karen Berger for Group 43. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Berger. And now to your opponent, Mr. Dan Casey. Casey's question reads, What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias? What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias?
You know, for any system of justice to work, it has to be two things. It has to have two things. It has to be just in reality, and it has to be just in appearance. Our court works hard to try and be just in reality. The statistics, however, don't seem to back that up. It appears that we need to do a better job of actually providing justice in reality. Equally, a system of justice will only work. Remember, this is what society counts upon in order to rule the rest of the society. And it has to be just in appearance as well. So not only do we need to be really, truly just and have just results, but we also need to run a system in a way that makes people have confidence in it. You need advocates on the bench who know what it's like to try and level the playing field for others, and who have worked their career, as I have, trying to level the playing field. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. All righty, moving to group 46, we'll start with H. James Curry. Your question reads, do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this? Do you believe the composition of juries adequately and fairly reflects society at large? Why or why not? If not, what can we do to change this?
The answer is probably no, but there are a number of reasons why that is. When you consider the fact that disproportionately certain segments of the population have felonies, and they're already wiped out. There's a process by which unfairness seems to escalate into other places. Employment, jobs, justice, our court system, everything. You know, I was reading an article before I came here today, and in that article, it pointed about the sentencing structure of our state. And it said we had mandatory minimums, but yet all over the state, when it came to issues of race, people broke those rules. We have a broken system. And it's going to take a lot more than just a couple of judges trying to be fair. We need to make sure that people follow the rules for everybody, everywhere. And it begins with equal access to the court system. My name is H. James Curry. Thank you very much.
Now to your opponent, one of your opponents, Maria Markison Weeks. Your question reads, if a person chooses to be pro se in your court and you recognize that they're being outmaneuvered by a more skillful attorney, how would you handle such an instance?
I think that's a great question. Luckily, a lot of times in circuit court, when you're dealing with a lot more serious cases, particularly felony cases, there aren't a lot of people that represent themselves. However, if someone does express a desire to represent themselves, a judge has to hold what's called a Feretta hearing, and it's a very long evidentiary hearing where they go through with the individual to make sure that they're actually competent to represent themselves, not just mentally competent, but they understand the rules and procedures and what's necessary in order to represent themselves. And one of the things that the judge has to warn them about is the fact that the judge cannot give them any advice and they cannot help them in any way. And if they go through this hearing and the person is determined that they can represent themselves, then they have a constitutional right to do so. But what the judge can then do is appoint standby counsel for them, which is an attorney that'll sit there with them through the court process, through the trial, and they will not represent them as a lawyer, but they will be available for them in the event that they have any questions during the hearing. So this way the person can then represent themselves and have advice. Thank you. Maria Weeks.
Thank you. You can pass that. Educating us tonight. All right, to the last person in this group.
I'm used to being the last person in the group.
No, last but not least. Of course not. All right.
I got a long question.
Long one. Recently, we saw 2 more persons of color killed by police officers, and for the most part, these officers are oftentimes found not guilty, and the judicial system is blamed. From your perspective, where do you see the breakdown? Is it the law enforcement officers, state attorneys, the juries, or the judges, and why?
That's a tough question. And It's a tough problem, and we're all facing the consequences of that problem. I think the problem lies with the fact that the grand jury system itself is broken. That the state attorney represents the executive branch, as does the police department. And that the executive branch is always going to try its best to give a free pass to its members. We need to find a system of independent examination of these situations when they come to play so that everybody feels that they are getting a fair shake. When we feel that we're not getting what is due to us, that brings a sense of hopelessness, and that hopelessness leads to violence. I want to bring sanity to the courthouse, which I think will bring safety to the streets. Dale Miller, Group 46.
Thank you. You can place your mic on your chair. Thank you. Did you find these judges' candidates forum this part of the forum helpful? Do you understand why this is important? Who's on your bench? All right, we're going to dismiss them by group. Thank you again, Group 39, Susan Lynn Allspector and Camille Coolidge-Shotwell. Thank you for being here, ladies. Group 42, Richard Brian Kaplan and Judge Michael Uson. Thank you, gentlemen. Group 43, Karen Elizabeth Berger and Dan Casey. Thank you. And rounding it out, thank you again, Group 46, H. James Curry, Maria Markinson Weeks, and Walter Dale Miller. Thank you